Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Appreciate you guys joining us. We got a little weekend update coming here for you. Apologies last show that we weren't able to show our faces. We had a technical issue where our video was completely unusable. Audio was great. So appreciate those of you who hung in there, and pleasantly surprised by how many people, Keith, actually missed seeing our faces.
I guess we're just a couple of handsome guys. They're clearly not here for the astute basketball analysis, but more to check out some dudes talking to each other. But yeah, no, we get it, guys. It was not planned. It was Trevor was being kind with some technical issues. It was an absolute disaster behind the scenes of a show. We had to start multiple times. We're both having some computer issues, but it's we got it for you. And then speaking of computer issues, yesterday I was trying to stay abreast of transaction news, update things from the middle of a soccer complex. That one of their big things was we have Wi-Fi, and it was bad. So Wi-Fi. I was,
not really.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. As Trevor uses the air quotes for those who are audio only.
Fantastic podcast.
Yeah, it was. We're that's it. Great for radio. We are through the bulk of the roster cut down. There's still some moves being made. We're going to talk about one that was made just before we went on air here, in a little bit here in the show. But we're almost there now. We're a couple days out from the regular season start. We get some player option news that happened. We contract extensions. So we got a lot of stuff to get into. And it's a football Sunday, and both of us have an interest in watching a little bit of that here. So let's dive right in.
That's right. I'm going to take, we're going to take 20, 30, however long this show takes. I'm going to take that time away from my stressing about my fantasy football teams. And instead, we're going to talk a little bit of basketball. So this is actually probably a healthy exercise for me here.
There it is.
Keith, you put out a tweet, and I thought it was pretty illustrative of around the NBA, how many teams are now doing this thing where they leave that 15th roster spot open. And Ryan McDonough, the former GM of the Suns, also got in on the conversation as well. So why don't we start there? Let's go through that, and let's talk about the roster spots that are still open and that are going to remain open. And then there's a bunch of two-way spots open around the league as well.
Hey, we love breaking news while we're recording. Woj. Phoenix Suns, Mikal Bridges agreed to a 4-year, $90 million rookie scale contract extension. So let's come back to that, obviously, because that is big news, and we will come back to that one here in a minute. So yes, open roster spots, and that tweet is already out of date, as the Celtics of all teams make me look poor by making another move today. They cut Jabari Parker, which we'll talk about in depth a little bit more. So the Celtics, I have one open standard spot, one open two-way spot. The Warriors, an open standard spot and an open two-way spot. The Lakers, an open standard spot and an open two-way spot. Miami, Milwaukee, Minnesota, all one open standard spot. Orlando has an open two-way spot. Suns have an open standard and an open two-way. Portland, an open standard. Spurs, an open two-way. Jazz, an open standard. Wizards, an open two-way. Now, here's what's going on with the vast majority of those teams that have, especially the standard spots. The two-way spots will likely be filled at some point here.
No reason
that's
not to.
That is probably more of, let's see who shook free on waivers here at the end of camp, and if there's somebody we really like, we'll bring them in. So with the standard spots, all of those teams are either tax teams or they're right on the border of being a tax team, minus Phoenix, but Phoenix is cheap, I guess is the best way to put that.
They just spent $90 million.
Just spending $90 million. I know, right? Yeah. That's odd timing there on that one, but they are, they only brought one extra guy to training camp. They sold their G League team. So the Suns are not overly invested here as far as that. Now, yes, they did pay Chris Paul. They just gave Mikal Bridges $90 million. But all these teams with open standard spots, their tax teams are really close to the tax. And what that says to me is these teams are going to kind of wait it out see if a need for them kind of comes up, or they'll get a guy later in the year when the tax will be lessened because it's a prorated contract and those kind of things. We already know the Lakers openly said they were going to leave an open spot. They've said that for feels like at least a couple months now almost. So with that's pretty much the push that like Miami, Milwaukee, Golden State, all these teams are expected to be playoff teams. So they're going to leave that spot open there for flexibility and then kind of see where it goes. And then, yes, the Celtics were the latest team to add to that as they waived Jabari Parker today. Parker had $100,000 guaranteed of his contract. And now they're going to jump back in to the free agent market. There's a little bit of buzz that I had heard yesterday that they were maybe looking at adding another true big. Al Horford is still uncertain when he'll be back after testing positive for COVID. And then Jaylen Brown is out. He's not a big, but he's out. And then Robert Williams, who we've said all along, his contract extension looks great. If he stays healthy, he's dealing with some knee soreness. So a little bit of worry there. So maybe that's the direction the Celtics want to go versus having Parker's kind of like that scoring forward type.
So with all of these spots open, there's what, if I'm counting correctly, there's like 9 standard spots that are open right now around the NBA.
Well done,
I mean, that's just, that's me working on my mathing here. But I'm looking at this thinking, the Players Association can't be thrilled that this is becoming a bigger and bigger thing where more and more teams are doing this, because that's 9 players. I mean, you look at some of the names, and we're going to get into them in a bit. Some of the names that have been waived, there's guys who legitimately should be on NBA teams right now that are good enough to be and are not, because number one, you've got the luxury tax, but I think there's another piece to this here. And I think the financial motivation is the top here, right? I mean, we talk about any of these teams, you're saving a significant amount of money if you just wait till midseason to add a player. Maybe it's somebody on the buyout market. Then if you sign somebody now, waive that player when the buyout market heats up, then sign another player to fill that spot. And then it's a big difference when you're a luxury tax team. But
well, and even more, sorry to interrupt, but even more so if you're like the Warriors and you're so deep into the tax and there's penalties and all those kind of things, keeping a guy can be, a guy whose contract on your cap is only 1.7 million. That can be like 9 million real dollars. So it gets, as the deeper into the tax you go and the more you have repeater tax, that becomes, your penalty just gets, larger and larger there. And that becomes really, even for the richest of ownership groups, that becomes kind of an untenable situation.
Exactly. And then the flip side of this, or the other piece to this, is that with the exception of the Wolves, these are all teams that probably see themselves as destinations on the buyout market, which again, I think is a storm coming. I think there's going to be a battle with the next CBA about the buyout market and how it operates, because now you've got a lot of teams that are blatantly saying, look, there's a pretty solid chance that we're going to get somebody better than who we can sign right now if we just wait, because some of these other teams that aren't as good as us, they're going to buy out players and we're going to be able to scoop them up for free. So we're not even going to bother spending money right now. And so I think it's more of a sign of the strength of the buyout market and how that's become just this assumption that there's going to be this tidal wave of players that's going to come onto the market midway through the season that these top tier teams are going to be able to add.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Yeah, we know what it is at this point. It's just the way the system works. And we know those guys look at it and they say, hey, all right, well, what do they look at? Do you have a chance to win? And am I going to play? All right, great. Because the money is roughly the same at that point in the year for almost all of these players. Every once in a while, you'll see a team hang on to part of an exception or something like that. So they have that to use, or maybe more in recent years, the disabled player exceptions have been available and those kind of things. But yeah, and then Minnesota, I'm glad you mentioned, because yes, they are not in a position of being active on the buyout market, but they also shouldn't be paying the tax for a team that's probably not going to be in the playoffs. So that becomes a whole other thing there. So yeah, it's just kind of the way it works here. So let's see, where we go, moving forward with this, and we'll see what it all kind of comes together as with these open roster spots. But we get into these contract extensions since that's top of mind here.
Let's do that. Do you want to go? Yeah, let's do the extension. So might as well go with the one that just happened, right? So
Sure.
let's start there. So I mean, look, the Suns have been criticized quite a bit for not spending money here. And
Yep.
I think to get Bridges on a less than a max deal, given the efficiency that he's shown, that's pretty solid for them. And I know he's
Yeah.
not the guy that's putting up 20 and 10 or anything like that, but extremely efficient with his shooting. He's a guy that you can kick the ball out to in the corners. He's going to knock it down. Good defender. These types of players, these 3-and-D style wings, they get paid. And so when I look at this deal from the Suns' perspective, I think, wow, this looks great for them. I think this is kind of a steal for them in terms of value.
Yeah, I completely agree. I look, and now the thing we always got to kind of keep in mind here now is let's see if there's
Yes.
incentives and bonuses in there and what are real numbers with this. But even if this is the real number, if it is 90 million, I think that's perfectly fair for him. 22.5 million makes complete sense for a guy of his talent and ability levels and his importance to Phoenix. Now I'm very curious, how does this look like? For what does this look like for
Right.
DeAndre Ayton? Because he and his ownership group need to be saying, all right, if you're going to go 90 million on him, like, come on, let's go. Like, I'm the big man here. I was the number one pick. I was the one who was, borderline dominant at times in the postseason. And it's funny, I've seen some people throw him back. Like, he couldn't even do anything against Giannis. Yeah, who can? Like, I mean, we got to stop with stuff like that. That's just so dumb. It's, if we did that, we would have had Michael Jordan would have to retire because it would have been literally nobody left because no one could do anything with MJ for his entirety of his career. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see how that impacts. But for Bridges alone, this is a really good
Mm-hmm.
value. He's improved as a shooter, as a scorer, as a playmaker, and he's remained being a fantastic defense. And he was a big part of Chris Paul get the lion's share of the credit, and Booker and Ayton are the bigger names. But Bridges was a huge part of why the Suns made that finals run. So good on Phoenix there, even though I called them cheap earlier in the show. Good on them there for spending money. But now go the distance, as
Go
we
the
said
distance.
with Field of
Terrence
Dreams
Mann.
quotes, and lock up DeAndre Ayton and move this forward.
So let me ask you this: what's the bigger steal here for the Suns? Cameron Payne, who got, was it 2 years, 17 million, I believe, or this deal for Bridges, 4 years, 90 million? Like, I think both are bargains. Which do you think is the bigger bargain for Phoenix?
Um, I'll go with Bridges just because that's a more important
Mm-hmm.
player in position than your backup point guard. I think Cameron Payne is. I'm very happy for him. I think he earned every bit of that contract. The Suns are smart. They structured it as one of those deals that dips
Mm-hmm.
next year, as they did with Chris Paul's contract. So that I think knowing Bridges and Ayton were probably going to have contract extensions kicking in there. So yeah, and my guess is Phoenix too. Just as an aside, I wouldn't be surprised if they're working on some way to get off of Dario Saric's contract just because they don't need
Right.
him. He's not going to be anything this year. That's just an $8.5 million placeholder because he's out for the season with the torn ACL. So let's see what they do there. But yeah, I'll go with Bridges to answer your question. I just think that's one that
No,
made sense.
I agree. I think that's the bigger bargain. Both are great bargains, though, for the Phoenix Suns. So impressive work by them. Right after we finished our last show, the Wendell Carter extension came down. 4 years, 48 million for him. What are your thoughts there with your hometown team and Wendell Carter?
Yeah, I had projected for Spot Track that he would get 4 years, 50. I thought
Oh,
is what he would get. So
pretty
I'm
close.
not pretty,
Right
pretty,
there.
yeah, I'm pretty happy with myself on that one because it's pretty, stopped clock twice a day. So I think that's one that makes a lot of sense. That is only slightly more than what mid-level money will be in each of those
Mhm.
years for the most part. Maybe a little bit more by the time we get to the outer years. But yeah, I think this is really good work by the Magic to lock up a guy who's got considerable potential. He's actually been playing alongside Mo Bamba as the four in some lineups because their forwards are just a mess without Isaac and Chumo Kiki are both down. So they've been starting Carter and Bamba together. Carter's done pretty well in that role as the starting four-man. They're running some offense through him, some elbow actions. We're starting to see why there were all those Al Horford comps back in when he was coming into the league of, hey, you can run some stuff through this guy, he can handle it, he can shoot it, he can pass. He's really starting to show that stuff. And I think that deal is fantastic. Now we'll see, did they get something done with Mo Bamba? Right. Just as a reminder, we're recording this on a Sunday. Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern is the deadline to get contract extensions done with rookie scale players. Otherwise, they will go into restricted free agent or have the opportunity to go into restricted free agency this offseason.
So Phoenix, DeAndre Ayton, clock is ticking. Let's see if they're able to get that done.
Yeah,
that's the big one.
Let's do that real quick. Sorry, and I'll pull it up. I should have had it ready, but we'll just run through some of the names that we're still watching here from this class. Remember, this is the 2018 NBA draft class that we're looking at here. So it is DeAndre Ayton clearly is the number one player. Marvin Bagley is not going to get extended. Jaren Jackson Jr., that's another one to keep an eye on there. Mo Bamba, I already mentioned. Miles Bridges, he's probably another guy. I think the Hornets would like to lock him up if they can with that. And then you're getting down into kind of the role-playing guards. So Dante DiVincenzo, Lonnie Walker, Kevin Huerter there. And then lower in the first round, it's either guys who aren't eligible anymore or guys who aren't going to get extended. So guys who are probably not going to get extended, Marvin Bagley, Colin Sexton, likely will not get an extension. And then the rest of them, I think, are pretty obvious that they will not get extended. So we'll see. So few names to watch here as we go. A lot of big guys, kind of interestingly enough. And a lot of guys landed extensions already in this class. Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Carter, we just talked about, Mikal Bridges now, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Michael Porter Jr., Robert Williams. So all those guys have already landed contract extensions.
And of all these guys, I mean, DeAndre Ayton, like the Suns aren't looking to part ways with him or anything like that. Even if worst case scenario, they don't come to an extension, he'll be a restricted free agent next offseason. It can create tension, but I don't think the Suns are preparing to say goodbye to DeAndre Ayton or anything like that. Marvin Bagley, on the other hand, like how are the Kings feeling here? Especially look, like as much as we say, oh, you know, the Suns, they took DeAndre Ayton over Luka, and why did they do that and everything? The Kings did too with Marvin Bagley, and now Marvin Bagley, what's his future even going to be? An extension isn't coming. Man, that's rough to take when you're a team that's needed picks. And I think the Kings are going to be better this season, but you've needed these picks to hit, and to have Ayton look good now, Luka look good, Trae Young, even Jaren Jackson Jr., when he's on the floor, he's been really good. And the Kings wound up with Marvin Bagley, and it just has not worked out for them. That's rough if you're a Kings fan.
That is the Sam Bowie pick
Darko.
Of the potentially of the MJ, right? You got not saying DeAndre Ayton's going to become Hakeem Olajuwon, because that would be crazy, but you have the big time big man, and then you've got Luka kind of as the all-time star. Hey, just for because I feel good about this. Right, I Wendell Carter, I was pretty close. 4 for 50 was my projection. He got 448. Let's see. Prediction for or I said 448. He got 450. Mikal Bridges, prediction on Spot Track. I will tweet this so anybody can go look. 4 years, 90 million, no options.
4 years, 90 million. So that was your prediction for him?
Yep.
Wow.
That was my prediction. Yeah, look at you, boy.
I would not.
Come on.
What made you predict that? Because I would have assumed, from my personal perspective, when I heard that number, I went, "Ooh, that's less than I would have thought he would have gotten," because of how valuable wings are in the NBA right now. What was it that made you say, "Okay, he's going to get a decent amount less than a max deal"?
That's a good question. The fact that I figured they were going to give Ayton a max without even really questioning it. I figured if they went to the max for Ayton, that would get it. That would have to knock some off Bridges, because you can't have so many guys making close to $30 million.
Well,
it's just, it's not, no team can do that. I mean, we're even seeing the Nets and the Warriors, as we talked about, leaving roster spots open. They waived some guys and those kind of things. So that was, I kind of took a little bit of a haircut off that for So
Bridges. You're saying that when DeAndre Ayton gets his new deal, he owes Bridges a steak dinner.
Something like that.
Okay. Let's get into some of the other moves that have taken place recently. Well, actually, wait, before we get into that, we got to get into whatever we want to call it, the Kyrie conundrum or whatever it is. It's definitely not a Simmons siren, sure. But Woj on the Woj pod with Malika Andrews, they shared that the Nets are essentially preparing as though Kyrie is done for the season. Like, he is not going to be there for the entire season with him, and also added in the interesting little tidbit that the Nets felt that the James Harden trade, the deal to get him, was a necessity because they weren't sure if they were going to be able to rely on Kyrie. So even before all this stuff happened, there was already a sense that Kyrie, they didn't know where his head was going to be at moving forward, and that he just wasn't as reliable as some other players. And so that was part of their reasoning to go and get a guy like James Harden. So I think that's some interesting info from inside the Nets, especially on Kyrie being pretty much done.
Yeah, I think the Nets, I think the best way to handle this is that he's not going to play. You just move on. And then if he comes back, bonus, right? It's, I mean, who wouldn't want to add a player of Kyrie Irving's talent level back to your team? So I think you kind of out of sight, out of mind. I fully realize that it's harsh to put it that way, but that is just the reality of it. You can't keep pretending that he's there and keep, doing this stuff and those kind of things. So so I think you do kind of out of sight, out of mind. We go, we move this forward and go, with what we got here, and that's enough to win a championship. So that's where our mindset is. You got all your guys there and go, and clearly they're, without coming out and directly saying it that they're not happy, there's enough stories coming out now and things like that. They pulled the contract extension offer. Clearly the Nets are not thrilled with the way this has gone.
No, they're not. And
nor should they.
And I've seen some rumblings from a few different places that, look, even if the Nets decide to put Kyrie on the trade market, there might not be that many teams that are all that interested, given that he's got a player option next off season, so he could just be a rental. The return for Kyrie probably wouldn't be quite as great as most would think it would be, given the situation, and that there's some teams that will just say, who knows what he's going to do in the future? We don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly it. You can't, I don't know. I don't really have a lot more to think about with this. I do think it's interesting that, and I apologize if you said it clear, I'm a little distracted trying to follow up on a couple things that are going on right now. But it is Woj saying that Philly has no interest in a Kyrie for Simmons swap. That also says too, like, teams they're just like, hey, is this guy just going to up and walk away on us? Like, well, what's going on here? So it's it kind of is what it is, and we're not going to see people I think really bend over backwards for Kyrie Irving at this point. Just with some of the uncertainty of what his availability might look like.
Okay, let's get into some of the moves. There were some surprising ones, and I've got a big picture view of this that I want to get into, but let's get into the drill down a bit here first, and let's talk about some of the moves here that have taken place. We've got the Grizzlies waiving Chris Dunn. He's on the way out, so that means Jarrett Culver and Sam Merrill wind up making their roster. Garrison Matthews was offered a two-way contract with the Boston Celtics, said no thank you. He's spent the last couple of years on two-way contracts. Apparently feels like he deserves a full NBA contract, and so he will look elsewhere. There are 9 open roster spots around the NBA, but I don't think many of those teams are looking to use them right now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. I mean, Keith, you're the Celtics guy. Any insight into that one?
Yeah, it was interesting because when he came in, it was clear that's what the team wanted to do. I think was have that option open of, hey, if you outplay somebody here, we'll be happy to keep you on a standard deal. If you don't, you've got two-way eligibility. We'll bring you in on a two-way, and it's very clear he did not want to do that, and that's his right. He outplayed that status last year.
Yes.
I thought he became one of the better shooters in the league. He became a starter for that Wizards team. As much as that's the bulk of that is owed to Russell Westbrook really playing well down the stretch. When Matthews was inserted in the starting group, they kind of took off too, and then he was a starter throughout the playoffs or the play-in and the playoffs, both for the Wizards. So yeah, I get it with Garrison Matthews of, hey, I feel like I've earned a standard deal. I wonder, when we're a month or two into the season, does he relook at that? And there are guys who would rather go to the G League and stay an NBA free agent than sign on a two-way and be kind of stuck with a team. So he may take that approach too and say, hey, I'd rather have a 10-day contract when they start in mid-January and those kind of things versus getting kind of stuck here on a two-way deal with
a team. Teams are always looking for shooters, so Matthews has got to feel pretty good that at some point somebody, I mean, who knows, maybe he's already hearing that a team would be interested in him if he was a free agent, and that may have factored into his decision. But I mean, it is interesting. Usually you don't hear of players turning down contracts like this, guys who don't have a job otherwise. But again, Matthews has proved himself over the last couple of seasons. And Dante Exum is another guy. Got waived by Houston. I mean, big name, was one of the top players in the draft at that time. What was that, the 2014 draft that he was in when he was the number 4
Was
pick?
it that long ago? God, I hope it wasn't that long
I think
ago.
it might have been. That was the Julius, that was the Julius Randle and Marcus Smart year, right? Or am I mixing up my drafts? I'll look it up while we're going
right.
here.
No, I think you're right. I got it. You keep going.
Anyway,
yeah, you're right. 2014. There's the number 5 overall pick.
Time has flown by. But Dante Exum, look, he's another big name. It played well for Australia over the summer. And so I'm a little bit surprised. And then I'm just going to piggyback all these. So Jabari Parker also waived by the Celtics. So we'll talk about that one, of course, more in depth. Avery Bradley waived by the Golden State Warriors. I think when we look at some of these guys that are getting cut right now, you look at the fact that teams aren't using all their roster spots, but you look at some of the names that are still out there. I think big picture, this is an argument for why expansion, the NBA is ready for it right now. The names that are out there on the market are guys who really, I mean, Garrison Matthews, this guy should be on an NBA team. Dante Exum should be on an NBA team right now, right? This is a strong argument in favor of expanding the league, and whether that's Vegas and Seattle or wherever else they're looking, I think you can look at the talent level right now and say they're ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Now, I think, too, the other thing is then look at the box scores when we get into playing games starting here in a few days, and some of the guys who just don't play because that's how deep some of these teams are. I think, there's more than enough talent to support 2 more teams in the NBA. A couple other big names, as you were kind of hitting on them. I'll throw a couple more out there. Harry Giles, lost the
Isaiah Hartenstein.
Battle to Isaiah Hartenstein, who got that spot. We're going to talk a little bit about those guys there in a minute that earn those spots. But so Harry Giles is out there. The Trailblazers, Marquise Chris, Patrick Patterson, Quinn Cook, as Dennis Smith Jr. won that final roster spot there in Portland. Portland, of course, is one of those tax teams that's going to carry an open roster spot as well. Tyrell Terry of the Mavericks. He was the 31st pick in the draft just 2 years ago. He was waived. They ate 2 years of guaranteed money to do that. Ishmael Wainwright from the Raptors, who had showed up pretty well in summer league and in preseason. He was cut. So those guys are all kind of moving on here. They're at least heading off to free agency is the better way to put it. And then again, Jabari Parker joined that group today. So we've got a lot of good names out there. Some two-way conversions. Tyler Cook with the Bulls. He's the guy who's bounced around for the last couple of years on two-way deal or 2 ways in 10 days, which that was a fantastic site back in the day. Shout out to those guys that are no longer running that site, but what a great site that was. It was focused on the G League. So he's with the Bulls on a two-way. Malik Fitz converted to a two-way with the Jazz. RJ Nembhard with the Cleveland Cavaliers. David Duke with the Brooklyn Nets. Not that David Duke, the basketball playing David Duke.
Every time I hear that, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, unfortunate. And then the big man, Taco Fall, converts to a two-way with the Cleveland Cavaliers because apparently the Cavs not only want all of the centers, but they want the biggest one that there possibly is as well. So
they need more.
So yeah, those were the two ways.
They need more centers if you're the Cavs, right? Yeah. I mean, in fact, we had one of our talking points. I don't think we mentioned it, but Ed Davis winds up on the Cavs because again, I don't know. Yeah. The Cavs, I think, are preparing to play the Kings, and both teams can run out a five-man lineup of just centers. Let's just do the 5x5. That's what we'll call it. It'll be the 5x5 showdown, and we'll make a game out of it. Let's play it on an outdoor court just to make it as funky as we can, and let's do this thing.
And it could be on a super windy day because nobody's taking jump shots anyway. So yeah, well, I would watch it. It'd be fun. I'm not gonna lie, I would definitely tune in. One of the more maybe surprising waivers, Gary Payton, waived by the Golden State Warriors. Thought he might stick there, but again, trying to save a little bit of money. The Warriors took about a $650,000 cap hit in dead money, but waiving that. Team options that were picked up, because that's also the other thing that's happening right now. Rookie scale team options. The Memphis Grizzlies, John Morant, no-brainer, right? Brandon Clark, no-brainer. Desmond Bane, no-brainer. Apparently a brainer. Is there a brainer, right? There's no brainers.
There must be.
Brainers? Right?
It's a yin and yang
right?
thing,
If there's a no-brainer, there must be a brainer. Jarrett Culver did not have his rookie scale extension picked up, and the reporting is it will not be picked up. The deadline for that is on Halloween, October 31st, is the deadline for those. So interesting, at least. Not a huge surprise, I guess, from that standpoint. But yeah, and just to be clear, too, teams do not officially decline team options. They just simply don't pick them up. So that's why you don't see a transaction on that or anything like that. But generally when they do these, they do them all at once. We've seen a handful of these done now, and they usually do them in a batch where they'll pick up, if they've got 2, 3, 4 guys eligible, they'll do them all on the same day. Tyrese Halliburton also had his rookie scale extension picked up. In reminder, that's not for this year. They're already under contract. That's for the next season, 2022-23 season. You do this approximately a year in advance with those ones. So yeah, that's where we're at with those.
All right. And last thing to get into here. 5 players this year went from camp invites to full contracts. And that's Isaiah Hartenstein of the Clippers, Wayne Selden of the Knicks, Dennis Smith Jr. of the Blazers, Matt Thomas, shooter of the Chicago Bulls, and Brad Wanamaker of the Pacers. Keith, you mentioned this on Twitter. You said the last time this happened was Dwight Howard, who actually with the Lakers, who actually requested a non-guaranteed deal so that he could prove to everybody how committed he was because Dwight being Dwight. But it doesn't happen very often. So why now? Is this just a random occurrence, or is there some reason why this happened this year? It normally doesn't happen for anybody, and this year it happened for 5 guys.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think the reason it happened for so many players is so many guys signed these types of contracts this year. There were 2 things that did not happen this offseason that generally do happen. The first is very few players got any form of partial guarantees this offseason to come to camp. The only team that did that was the Toronto Raptors. Nobody else did partial guarantees, and we saw the Raptors. They ate some money by waiving Ish Wainwright. They ended up eating his contract there, or part of it for the next 2 seasons. So that is the that's that first part. The second part is so you didn't have the partial guarantees. You did not have the standard non-guarantee contract signed either, because those sit against you against the tax, whereas these do not. These ones do not go against the tax until they make the regular season roster, which it looks like all these guys will. Now, as you mentioned, those 5 guys, we could also kind of sort of add Armani Brooks in there from the Rockets. His was a little bit of a different process as they were kind of spinning around a little bit. But yeah, it is. So what ultimately is with these 5 guys is now their contract will convert to a standard non-guaranteed contract that counts against the cap and all that, and it becomes fully guaranteed on the league-wide guarantee in mid-January.
I was going to say 11th. That was one off.
Yeah, it's 10th is the day, but it's actually January 7th is the day you have to really watch because they have to clear waivers in advance of the fully guaranteed date. But yes, so it's kind of January 7th, but it's really January 10th is the date. But so those 5 guys, kudos to them for getting there. A couple other surprises I just want to throw out there. Sam Decker seems to have made the Toronto Raptors, so good on him for getting his way back to the league. One of your former guys, Isaac Bonga, has also made the Toronto Raptors, so that one was a bit of a surprise that he's going to be there, on that team as well. So Matt Thomas was one of these 5 players. He's going to be on the Bulls with that. So yeah, definitely saw some surprising roster decisions, I think, down the stretch here, including, as we already covered, some of those veteran free agents that popped free. I just want to make sure we hit it too. 2 teams, San Antonio and Charlotte, are still +1 on players and need to make one more waiver to get into regular season roster compliance. But because those are fully guaranteed contracts already, they don't need to do that until Monday. They'll, and that is likely what they'll do. I mean, it could happen later today, but it'll probably be Monday because there's no savings. The reason why almost all of these moves were made yesterday at 5 was because if they were on the roster past 5, teams start to incur a per day cap hit. So that's why you saw the flurry of moves. There was approximately about, I want to say in the last 2 days, there was roughly 100 ish waivers made in the last couple of days. So not the NFL by any means, but still a busy weekend.
Enough to burn out your computer.
yeah, for the most part. Yeah, absolutely. While working off crappy Wi-Fi in the middle of a soccer complex.
All right. Well, I think that that about covers it for today. We are going to have tomorrow, Keith and I are going to put together a season preview show. We're going to break down a lot of different things. We're going to talk a little bit about the major awards. We're going to talk about standings, things like that. Just give you kind of a general overall look at the beginning of the NBA season because it does start up on Tuesday. Can't wait. Really exciting. And we're going to have some special stuff coming for the regular season as well. Keith, anything else before we get out of here?
No, tomorrow's show, you guys can bookmark that and then come back and tell us how stupid we are and yell at us. You'll do it live, I'm sure, anyway, but then you can really come back and hammer us in the future for being like, hey, how did you not know, player X was going to up and retire mid-season because he just decided he wanted to trade in Bitcoin instead. And then you can yell at us.
Keith, before we go, I have one last thing that I'd like to throw out here for you. In just about an hour or so, my wife is a big Cowboys fan. And the Cowboys are playing the Patriots. So what do you say we make this a little bit interesting? And if the Cowboys win, I'm going to put a Cowboys graphic on your video tomorrow. We'll add a little thing in the corner. And if the Patriots win, I'll put a Patriots graphic on mine. Is that at least something a little fun out of it?
All right. Yeah, at least something. That's fine. Okay. That's okay. I got faith in Mac Jones and my boys.
All right.
Let's get it done, fellas. Yeah, I'll take that. And then, yes, for anybody wondering, we've already talked. We're going to do some fun stuff when the Celtics and Lakers play.
That's right.
This year. We'll have some fun wagers. But, yeah, let's do it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. All right, guys. We'll see who comes out on top here. Is it Mac Jones and the Patriots, or is it Dak Prescott and the Cowboys? And then you guys will get to find out tomorrow who lost this one. All right, guys. Make sure you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Don't forget to turn on those notifications as well. Till next time, stay safe and see you.